some principles of classical conditioning. Now this topic is divided into two principles. The first one, the highlighted lines, the first two lines which are highlighted if you are seeing properly, that is the first principle, and the remaining is the second. Now let's get into this first principle. Extinction, once condition, always condition. Pavlov. Now Pavlov is Ivan Pavlov, who actually proposed this theory of classical conditioning, learning by association. It's the full name of that theory. Now, if you don't know what this theory is, and also the famous experiment conducted by Ivan Pavlov, which was the dog experiment, I would highly recommend you to watch that. I'll give you all the parts of the theory of learning and that experiment as well, which is mentioned in all those three parts of those videos named as theory of learning part 1, part 2, and part 3. You might be able to see a black pop-up on the first part of your screen which will redirect you to the bottom of the description, and in the bottom of the description there will be three videos. I would recommend you to watch all of them, part 1, part 2, and part 3, and then get into this video. Pavlov, after coming up with the principle of learning, tried to understand conditions which one can unlearn the acquired conditioning. So how can we get rid of conditioning? Stop giving UCS when the conditioned stimulus. Now we talked about UCS, CS, and all this. UCS is unconditioned stimulus. We talked about it in the last video. As I told you, the three videos, part 1, part 2, part 3, I would recommend you to watch them first and then come to this video, because you would know the background actually, what these terms mean, and who is Ivan Pavlov, what is the theory of classical conditioning, learning by association, and what is the experiment. You need to have knowledge of that first. So how can we get rid of conditioning? Stop giving UCS when the conditioned stimulus is presented for multiple times. In the absence of UCS, it will eventually lead to the disappearance of the conditioned response. This phenomenon is termed as extinction by Pavlov. Now, it gives you an example. In the context of Pavlov's dog, now as I told you, it is important to watch that experiment, because you see this example which this topic is using is Pavlov's dog. It is from the dog experiment, from the, I guess, now I don't know exactly, but I guess theory of learning part 2, I guess, was the one in which we talked about this experiment. Pavlov's dog, if the bell was not followed by food for many presentations, then after some time the dog will stop salivating in response to the bell. Now, if I were to summarize the topic of dog experiment, what it was that Ivan Pavlov is a physiologist, which around 1889 it started to, and I mean he noticed the thing that his dog salivates whenever it sees food or its empty food pan. So he actually observed that, and he thought that let's conduct an experiment on it. Let's conduct a study. That study was conducted into two trials and all. The first trial was called classical conditioning. Now let's summarize what exactly that experiment was. It was about to see if the dog learns how, for example, it took a neutral stimulus, which is a bell, and then it actually used to ring the bell, and then it was quickly followed by the food. Now, at first, the dog didn't give any response on the sound of the bell, but for doing it many times, ringing the bell and giving the food, ringing the bell and then giving the food, showing the food, then the dog actually learned and started to. Now after that, when after doing this for multiple times, when the bell was rung, the dog starts salivating without the food. It started salivating just by the sound of the bell. That was what the experiment was saying. If the bell, now if you didn't understand, because I would recommend you to watch that video, because we learned in depth. I was just summarizing for those people who actually watch that video of mine about that experiment. Pavlov's dog, if the bell was not followed by food for many presentations, then after some time the dog will stop salivating in response to the bell. What it is trying to say here is that in the experiment, the food was for the bell. First, the bell was rung, and then the food was followed by it. But if you do the same, opposite of same, you ring the bell and not give food for multiple times, then the dog will stop the response of salivating for the bell, for the ringing of bell or the sound of the bell. But the unconditioned stimulus, bell, US means unconditioned stimulus, is again followed by unconditioned stimulus food after extinction has taken place. Now, what is extinction? Extinction is the dog stopping to response in the form of salivating just by the sound of bell once you not show it food or not give it food for some time, as we discussed in the last point here in the context of Pavlov's dog, this point. Now, but when unconditioned stimulus, US, bell is again followed by unconditioned stimulus, which is food, after extinction has taken place, conditioned response, salivation, will return very quickly, a process known as reconditioning. Now, here, if you again do the same thing which he did in the experiment, bring the bell and follow the food by it, then it will again response in salivation. The dog will again respond in the form of salivation, will turn very quickly. A process this process of again gaining this learning capability, or gaining this or again giving this response of salivation, is known as reconditioning. The reappearance of the conditioned response after a time interval due to UCS and CS pairing is known as spontaneous recovery. Generalization and discrimination, responding to similarities and discrimination. Suppose that Pavlov's dog also salivates in the response to the doorbell, metronome sound, as well as the bell of his wall clock. Then this phenomenon will be called a stimulus generalization, the tendency to make response to stimuli similar to a conditioned stimulus. So what it is trying to say is that uh, the dog, according to that experiment, the dog used to salivate just after, in the end of the experiment, the dog started salivating just by the sound of the bell. But the dog started to do that by the sound of the doorbell as well, and the sound of the wall clock as well. So this phenomenon of it being salivating at all these things such as doorbell and wall clock, bell of the wall clock, is this is called stimulus generalization, the tendency to make response to stimuli similar to a conditioned stimulus. Now let me highlight the important stuff here, such as this stimulus generalization, the tendency to make response to stimuli similar to a conditioned stimulus. Now, I'm sorry, it actually it's not looking that good, but still I guess you can manage. Yes, this is important. You have to remember what, because it tells you what exactly stimulus generalization, or its definition, is: the tendency to make response to stimuli similar to a conditioned stimulus. On the contrary, if Pavlov's dog responds to the bell used in the experiment only and ignores other similar sounded bell, then this phenomenon will be called as stimulus discrimination, tendency to make a response to certain stimulus and ignore others. Now, again, according to the name of the topic, it talked about generalization and discrimination. Now, in the first point, we discussed about generalization. What was generalization? And what is discrimination? In the second point, it tells you what discrimination is. It is exactly opposite of generalization. If Pavlov's dog responds to the bell used in the experiment only, so if it only reacts to the bell which was used in the experiment, and ignores all the other kind of bells, then it is called as discrimination, tendency to make a response to discrimination, stimulus discrimination. I'm sorry, stimulus discrimination. Just like stimulus generalization, this is stimulus discrimination, tendency to make a response to certain stimulus and ignore others. Now again, I will highlight this definition of stimulus discrimination, you can call it. Now I'll give you some time to take the screenshot. That was it in this topic. Now the next topic is important, because in the next topic is named as the Little Albert. I'll talk about it in the next video. And this video is very important actually. You need to watch this video in order to watch the next video. Now I'll give you some time to take the screenshot. Because as I told you, three parts you might be seeing in the end of the description, which I just gave you. Why are they important? Is because this topic is very connected to each other. So you won't understand if you just jump in from like in the middle. That is the reason why I'm telling you to watch Theory of Learning Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 properly before coming to this video. And then once this video is finished, you can watch the other video, which is the Little Albert. Once this unit named as Learning and Memory is complete, I'll make a playlist of it. It would be much more easier for you to access it. And as you know, we completed the unit of Thinking and Language. The playlist is there. I would give that playlist in the bottom of the description as well, with those three videos. You can watch that unit as well. The whole unit is available in that playlist. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, if you want to leave a like, you can leave a like.